Forgetting versus forgiving. Forgetting. Most of what you see and do today, you will forget by tomorrow. In addition, most of the annoyances you encounter will be forgiven and forgotten. This is normal and healthy, as our brains tend to only fixate onto things that represent significance of some kind, either a reward or a threat, or a trigger for other meanings or curiosities, such as a contradiction. In functional, healthy relationships, most mistakes and annoyances are forgiven and forgotten because they are quickly resolved. There is mutual acknowledgement that ensures any given problem is not a threat in and of itself, and the offending person will adapt behavior for the relationship. However, when there is an abusive person in the mix, the concept of forgiveness gets so distorted and skewed to where it's just another tactic used to keep the target stuck in the web of dysfunction. The concept of forgetting is a popular concept, especially among dysfunctional families and relationships, especially when there is abuse involved, and it is how abusive behavior goes about being tolerated, perpetuated, and passed on through the generations. Forgetting often gets twisted into being a part of forgiveness, which in turn is twisted to mean reconciliation and allowance of abuse. This thinking is incredibly dysfunctional by itself, but when it's mixed in with a skewed sense of morality or with religion, it becomes downright destructive, dangerous, and even deadly. And worse, the more abusive behavior becomes wrapped in a twisted sense of morality, the harder it is for a person to break free from it, because their moral compass is being set to steer towards allowing problematic behavior instead of to run from it, and the whole time thinking that in doing so, that makes them a bigger or better person, or somehow more spiritual. Just because a person is family does not make it okay for them to abuse other members of the family, nor does it mean that the family members need to put up with it. Although in dysfunctional families, boundaries, let alone healthy boundaries, are often not present. People are used to allowing a lot of destructive behavior, enabling it to continue, minimizing or justifying it when it does happen, pushing the victims to keep contact, blaming the target when it does happen again, or acting like nothing problematic is happening, then blaming the target for being too sensitive. In short, life inside of a dysfunctional family, relationship, or dynamic of any kind is all about being forced to walk on eggshells and avoiding the elephants in the room. When a person starts to get a healthier sense of what problematic behavior is, and the self-esteem and self-worth to realize that they don't need to be someone else's emotional, verbal, or physical punching bag, and starts to develop some healthy boundaries in order to keep themselves safe and sane, many others will not be okay with this. Oftentimes, distancing ourselves from an abusive person is only the beginning. It's holding to our boundaries and potentially distancing ourselves from others that don't respect them, and especially enabling family members, that can be really difficult. Another type of forgetting that tends to happen has to do with trauma. If you've had a traumatic event happen, you will most likely find yourself going through a cycle of forgetting many of the traumatic things that have happened and then remembering them later, and then wondering how on earth you could have forgotten them to begin with. This is very normal, and it's often referred to as abuse amnesia. Any type of trauma can cause this fragmentation in a person's thinking. They don't need to have been severely beaten or even hit at all. If you are with a partner who chronically cheats, lies, steals, or who has any other type of shocking or jarring behavior, you may feel like a bomb went off in your life, and at first feel like you are shell-shocked and walk around feeling numb and fixated on this event. And then in time you may find an old journal, or something might trigger an old thought or feeling, and you may find yourself surprised that you could have forgotten that. All of that is very normal and is, in part, how the brain processes trauma. With time and healing, all of the pieces will come together, and your recollection of events won't feel so fragmented. And of course, the conversation on forgiveness isn't complete without discussing the phrase, forgive and forget. When a person goes through something traumatic, while they may not remember the most painful parts of the trauma because it's too much for them to handle, they will never forget every aspect of that event. Instead, with time, and generally with support, they can become more emotionally equipped to endure it. If someone has wronged us, it is really important that we don't fall into the thought hole of thinking that we need to forget what they did, because oftentimes forgetting is a slippery slope that fuels denial and cognitive dissonance and leads to reconciliation, which often leads to being abused again. We need to always remember that this person is dangerous and destructive so that we can, and do, stay away from them, especially if we are still holding on to the fantasy that they won't hurt us again down the road. Forgiving. The word and concept of forgiveness has been so twisted, misused, and tied to so many contradictory connotations that I don't even like using the word. In addition, telling a target of abuse that they need to or should forgive their abuser, especially when they are fresh out of the situation, can often be and is re-victimizing and minimizing. Forgiveness is a personal journey. It's insensitive and invalidating to be told what we should do, let alone to tell a person who is fresh out of a traumatic situation that they need to immediately jump to forgiveness. It's appropriate and healthy to have a wide range of emotions, anger being one of those emotions, after being abused or exploited, and it's also appropriate and healthy for a person to explore and work through these emotions as they surface and at their own pace. So here's how I approach this topic when people ask me about it. If they say, you need to forgive your ex, my response would either be something along the lines of, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not open to discussing this. Or, if by forgive you mean release anger towards myself for not realizing what was happening, or for thinking that it was okay that I was treated that way, then yes, I am working on that. Or, I'm working on releasing the anger I have against them now that I realize they have a destructive personality and that their treatment of me wasn't a reflection of me, but of them. This way we are clear about what forgiveness means, and giving an answer like that usually tends to stop those in their tracks who are giving their unsolicited opinion on what we should do. Keep in mind that you don't need to discuss or defend what happened to you or to anyone. You aren't obligated to stand there and argue your boundaries or your feelings. While forgiving someone means to release the anger you have towards them for their wrongdoings, it isn't complete until we forgive ourselves for staying. It's only a one-sided type of forgiveness to release our anger towards them if we are left carrying guilt, shame, and regret for how we were mistreated, especially after the fog of manipulation clears and we start to see their actions and our responses to their actions a lot more clearly. Forgiving a person doesn't mean forgetting, allowing, or reconciling. You can forgive someone and decide that you don't want them back in your life ever again. When we go about forgiving someone, it can be helpful to realize that the anger we have is justified and that it's part of healing. If someone hurts us and we aren't angry about it, then we are either numb from the pain, we are suppressing the pain, or we are so disconnected from our feelings, or that we have such low self-esteem and have been mistreated for so long that we don't feel worthy of being angry. If we do feel angry, it can be hard to let that anger go because it can feel like a safety blanket and the one thing that's protecting us from going back to an abusive person. Please know that you can release your anger and still not go back. But in order to do this, it's important that you remember why you need to keep your distance from them. Realizing the anger we have towards them releasing the anger we have towards them isn't a one-time decision. Although just realizing that we want to work toward releasing the anger is a huge first step. Releasing anger towards them and towards yourself, if you have any, takes time. You will most likely notice changes in your behavior and thinking, as anger is often deep-rooted and comes out as emotional triggers. As these emotional triggers surface, it can help to try to observe both the trigger and your reaction to it. It's also important to realize that all of your emotions are working in your best interest, even the unpleasant ones. These unpleasant emotions are there to act as a signal to either warn you to stop doing something, to stay away from certain people or situations, or to serve as a signal to alert you to unresolved issues. It might also help to reframe your understanding of anger and realize that it is the bodyguard to your hurt. If you can start acknowledging and addressing the hurt, the anger will often start to subside. This is going to sound harsh, but I want to be clear. It is not being forgiving to allow a person who is dangerous and destructive, especially if they aren't sincerely remorseful, to remain an active part of your life. That is being foolish and will only set you up for further hurt and heartache. If you want or need to keep contact with an abusive person for whatever reason, like they are a parent and you feel guilty or obligated to keep in contact with them, or they're an ex and you have a child with them, you can still set some boundaries to limit their destruction in your life. News story. My family was always pushing me to reopen contact with my father, who had molested me when I was a child. And for decades I would tell myself and others that I'd forgiven him just to keep the peace in the family. I fell for the whole, well, but the kids should know their grandfather line my family kept giving me. The truth was I didn't know how to navigate healthy boundaries with him, and so I caved in and let him be a part of our lives because I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. I've since realized that he was, and I'm sure still is, a predator, and I was being foolish for having him in my life and in the lives of my children and putting them at risk, not to mention feeling re-victimized every time I saw him. Once I realized this, I cut off contact. It disgusts me to think how toxic my family really is and how they used so much guilt, shame, and obligation to keep me in contact with my father. Do I forgive him? No, because he never asked for it and he doesn't deserve it. I still have a lot of anger that I have to work through, and I know it's important that I do so it doesn't destroy my life, but it's a process. Even if I were to forgive him, I'd never have anything to do with him. That would just be dangerous. Do I forgive myself for not realizing how toxic he and my family are? Yes, and this is something that I work on every day. Diane. News story. Forgiveness is necessary for a relationship to work. However, if someone does something wrong and there is no acknowledgement present, or instead there is only denial or minimization, the resulting invalidation can hurt as much or more than the bad behavior itself. It's adding insult to injury. You can forgive and forget a single instance of bad behavior if it is properly acknowledged, but if a pattern forms and the apologies begin to sound hollow, and you question the person's intent or ability to change behavior, intent doesn't matter much, because whether a person is unable or unwilling to curb harmful behavior, the result is the same. Forgiving and forgetting can be healthy, but only if there is sincere remorse present, followed by appropriate action to repair the damage done, and most importantly, that they have stopped doing whatever it is that they are doing. If they don't have accountability, remorse, and if the issue keeps happening, and we keep forgiving them when all they offer up is more empty words, then this is not forgiveness. It's us being in denial. This is very common in abusive relationships, especially if the person giving the blind forgiveness is denying the pattern because they want to hang on to the relationship. One of the most difficult things to deal with in a relationship with an abusive person is that they may partially admit doing wrong, but attempt to minimize it with excuses, demand that you forgive or forget the incident because they forgive you for your wrongs, but they will deny the pattern. Or they may acknowledge the problem and say everything you need to hear in order to get you to stick around. This is why looking at actions over a consistent period of time and not focusing on their words is so important. George. News story. My take on forgiveness is a biblical one, which is that it is always a two-part process. In the Bible, we are taught that the process begins when one person who has done the wrong feels remorse and expresses that remorse and then desires to make restitution and also commits to stop the behavior and to not repeat it. The wronged one then has opportunity to give the one who did the wrong forgiveness. In my opinion, you will never get the opportunity for this with the disordered, not sincerely and not in any lasting and meaningful way. So yes, you can and must forgive yourself. You need to feel remorse and make restitution to yourself and commit to not repeat it and forgive yourself. But all you can ever do with them after working through the stages of grief is get to a point of acceptance of who and what they are. That is the best you can ever hope for. You will rarely, if ever, get a chance to offer them forgiveness because they will never feel remorse, nor will they ever desire to make restitution, nor can they commit to stop the behavior and not repeat it. They literally cannot do it. It's not within the realm of their emotional and psychological wiring capability. But with great effort, you can get to acceptance. But you cannot forgive anyone who is not sorry and who does not desire to make restitution and who won't commit to do better. It's simply ludicrous to even talk about it. It's a 2-part process, and it's not going to happen in this lifetime. Lucy. Leaving versus leaving safely. Leaving. Leaving an abusive partner is rarely an easy or safe thing to do, and yet this is the most common advice that is given to partners of abusive people. Abusive behavior is driven by the desire to get and keep power and control over their targets and over the situation. If the target decides to leave, then the abusive person usually doesn't take it well, as they are losing power and control over their target and over the situation. This can and often does lead them to become very unpredictable, which can lead to a potentially dangerous or deadly situation. A person is in the most danger when they go to leave, and for the first 6 months to a year after they do leave for this reason. Even if the abusive person does not have a history of physical violence or aggression, they can still become violent. These situations can become especially dangerous if the person trying to leave is used to being threatened, intimidated, or getting into a physical fight with their partner. Because to them, this is just how things are, and this is normal. While it may be their normal, that doesn't make this current situation any less dangerous. Leaving safely. Leaving safely involves awareness of the kind of behavior they have, some degree of anticipating what they might do or are capable of, and ideally preparing if there is time. If there is no time, then don't worry about preparation, just leave. The rest can be figured out later. Developing a safety plan or exit strategy is often a key piece in leaving, because leaving an abusive relationship has a lot more in common with a person leaving a hostage situation than it does with a person leaving a relationship. A safety plan is a personalized plan that involves brainstorming and planning for everything for a target to get to safety if they need to leave immediately. Here are some potential elements of a safety plan. 1. Develop a safe word. A safe word is a word that you agree with a friend or family member ahead of time that lets them know you can't talk and are in danger. Make this word something that is unique, but nothing that would raise a red flag to anyone else. Something like kitten or coffee. Agree on a word that you could work into a sentence like, "Did you see that cute kitten video I sent you?" Or, "I've had a long day and could really go for a cup of coffee." The goal here is to alert the other person that something is wrong, but in such a way that the abuser wouldn't realize that you are speaking in code if they are overhearing you or monitoring your texts or calls. The person who knows your safe word needs to know that you might not be able to answer any more questions, and that if you hang up, they need to call 911 and use a GPS locator on your phone to find your location, if possible. 2. Get copies, or ideally take originals, of all important papers. These would be copies of your birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, auto insurance, auto registration, divorce papers, citizenship papers, immunization records, and anything else important. 3. Make extra sets of keys. Make extra sets of keys for your house and vehicles. Give a set to a friend and keep a set somewhere hidden on the different vehicles or outside in case you need to get out fast or in case the abuser takes your keys. 4. Pack a go bag. Pack a bag of several sets of clothing and some shoes for the kids and yourself. Keep these bags someplace safe, perhaps at a friend's house. Do not keep these bags where the abuser might find them. You do not want to alert him or her that you are leaving. 5. Keep extras of medication. If you or the kids are on medication, keep extras in your go bag. Make sure to also pack any medical supplies that might be needed, such as insulin syringes, blood testers, blood testing strips, asthma inhalers, etc. Make sure you check them periodically to make sure they aren't expired. 6. Have a safe location. If you leave, you don't want the abuser to know where you are going. Safe houses and shelters are good, as are motels and hotels that are out of the way. 7. Change the passwords to your email, phone, and any online accounts. If your abuser knows your passwords for any accounts, err on the side of caution and assume that you are being monitored. Change all the passwords for every account, and it's a good idea to use a different password for each, as well as a password that your abuser doesn't know. If you are finding that your abuser still seems to know what you are doing or saying, it's a good idea to take your computer and phone into Best Buy or a technology store and see if they can check for any hidden tracking software, as well as clean your computer to be on the safe side. Number 8. Make sure to turn off the Find My iPhone or GPS feature on your phone. Your abuser can track you this way. If you aren't sure how to do this, do a Google search on this topic to learn more. This GPS feature can also be on for Facebook and other social media, so make sure if you are posting on social media that it's not giving a location update to where you are. It's also a good idea to set your social media accounts, especially Facebook, to private so you can review the posts you are being tagged in, or to create fake social media accounts with a fake name and without pictures you've used before, so that you aren't being stalked by your abuser or by their friends, family, or coworkers. Number 9. Know what info is out there about you on the internet. If they seem to keep finding you, it could be that they are doing a Google image search on what you've used on Facebook or some other site. If you want to see what information is out there on the internet about you, Google your name, as well as any screen names you've used in the past. It's also a good idea to do a Google image search for any pictures that you've used in the past, or to click on the Google Images search after you've searched your name. 10. Don't hesitate to call the police. You may be struggling with whether or not to call the police, as maybe it might mean he gets fired from his job, or maybe you don't think the abuse is that bad yet. If you are feeling like you're in danger, call the police. Abusers can either be physically dangerous or they can hint at being physically dangerous. Quote, "If you left me, cheated on me, I'd kill you." Or, "It'd be a real shame if something happened to you." Or, "I took my vows seriously and will be with you until death do us part." Take all threats, either real or perceived, seriously. 11. Find alternative placement for your pets. If you are staying because of your pets, lots of victims do, line up alternative placement with a friend or family member. Some shelters can also help you find temporary housing for your pets. I know that you want to protect your pets, but please remember, if you don't protect yourself, you may not be around to protect them. 12. Only give out your location to people you trust. If you are leaving or thinking of leaving, it's really important that you only tell people you can trust. It's also a good idea to let them know that your former partner can be very manipulative, and regardless of what they say, generally that they need to get a hold of you because of some major issue with the kids, for example, that they should not give them any information. Instead, they can take down their info and offer to pass it along if they happen to see you. I'd also encourage you to have friends and family read more on the hoovering and flying monkey sections of this book so that they can also prepare for it. 13. Get a P.O. box for at least the first year. If you are concerned about them finding you, which would be an appropriate and reasonable concern if you are having to develop a safety plan, I would highly recommend keeping a P.O. box for a minimum of 1 year and using it as your primary address for everything: your children's school, your pharmacy, your bank, credit card companies, etc. There is no reason anyone needs to know your physical address. If a place requires a physical address for shipping, you can still use a P.O. box number. You may just need to write it differently. For example, if your P.O. box address is Jane Doe, P.O. Box 123, Atlanta, Georgia 30301, you could also write it as Jane Doe, 5555 Main Street number 123, which would be the address of the post office, Atlanta, California 30301. 14. Remember, Atlanta, Georgia. Remember, this is not your fault. Many men and women find themselves in physically abusive relationships. It's not easy to leave. People who haven't been in one generally don't understand. Find supportive friends, family, or groups on Facebook for domestic violence. You are not alone. Many people do care, and you deserve more. Hoping for the vet? hoping for the best versus erring on the side of caution. Hoping for the best. Hoping for the best is what optimism looks like in action. However, staying hopeful that a situation will change when nothing points to it actually changing, or when things are getting worse, isn't being optimistic. It's being in denial. And that level of denial can be not only destructive and dangerous, it can be deadly. Erring on the side of caution. Erring on the side of caution is what being realistic and seeing the situation clearly looks like in action. When we do this, then we are able to work with facts based on a person's prior behavior, so we can anticipate what they might do in the future. Let me clarify this point a bit. If a person has been dangerous in the past, it's a good idea to err on the side of caution and to assume they will be dangerous in the future. If a person has had a pattern of concerning behavior in the past that hasn't resulted in dangerous behavior, please know that it's usually a matter of time before it does. So, for example, just because a person has received threatening text messages in the past and nothing has happened, doesn't mean that nothing will happen in the future. In fact, it's usually the exact opposite. This kind of behavior is the early warning sign that some sort of violent behavior will occur in the future. So please, don't let your guard down or think that you are somehow safe just because they haven't done anything yet. It's not uncommon for other people, including friends, family, therapists, police, attorneys, etc., who do not know how highly manipulative, unhinged, or dangerous this person potentially is, to think or even tell you that you might be overreacting. And while that's incredibly infuriating and frustrating, please realize that sometimes, no matter how much proof you have, they still may not see that this person is dangerous and destructive. Keep a paper trail, emails, voicemails, video, etc., of what's going on, so you can try to prove your side, especially if it comes down to getting a restraining order or taking this person to court. Also realize that it's important for you to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe and sane, even if others think you are making too big of a deal out of things. I want to caution you for a moment here, because oftentimes if a person has been around destructive or dangerous behavior or situations for any length of time, and especially if they've been able to survive the situation so far, then their internal alarm system may not be going off when it should. So when it comes to erring on the side of caution, ask yourself what advice you'd give to a good friend, your child, or a younger sibling if they were in a similar situation. Or ask yourself what the most emotionally healthy person would do if they were in your situation. If your plan for handling a dangerous or destructive person in your own life doesn't match up to what you'd encourage someone else to do, then this is a sign something is off. If you would encourage a loved one to get out of harm's way, then it's a good idea to take that same advice for yourself. Don't wait until the harm actually happens to take action to keep yourself safe. News story. Everyone kept telling me to just leave him, but it wasn't that easy. He was really scary when he didn't get his way, and I knew he'd flip out and do God knows what to me. I didn't have time to put together a whole safety plan, but I did some of the basics, and when I left, I never looked back. I moved to a new state, changed my number, changed my social media accounts, and got a P.O. box. I feel like I can finally breathe. I didn't realize how stressed out I really was until I left. I don't know how I lived like that for so long. Cheryl. Confusion versus clarity. Confusion. Problematic situations and behavior both have one thing in common. The first warning sign is always confusion. When any of us starts experiencing problematic behavior, we often question what we are experiencing. This is normal because what we are experiencing isn't normal, and our brain is trying to make sense out of something that is nonsensical to us. This confusion leaves us at a cognitive dissonance crossroads where we do a double take or start second-guessing ourselves, wondering if it's us or if it's them. This confusion compounds when we experience problematic behavior that we hope isn't problematic. After an abusive relationship, especially an emotionally and/or psychologically abusive one, it's normal to continue to feel intense anger, rage, anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, distrust, paranoia, and the desire to isolate. Any dynamic with a crazy maker will make a person feel crazy, and these feelings of doubting your perceptions of reality can last for months or even years after the crazy maker is gone. This is a normal response to gaslighting, aka psychological abuse. The best way I can describe this period of time from between when the relationship with the crazy maker ends and your trust in your perceptions of reality and judgment returns is a lag time. When a person gets out of an abusive relationship, especially one that is full of covert abuse, such as gaslighting, they often struggle with understanding why they feel so numb or angry or terrified. This is especially true if there's nothing they can concretely point to and say, this right here is how they abused me. They called me these names or physically did these things to me. And because they can't point to what exactly happened or why a seemingly small thing, such as a text message from this crazy maker simply saying hi or happy birthday, makes them come totally unglued, they often feel that this reaction is an overreaction, especially when they start getting funny looks from other people when they try to explain why a simple text message makes them feel like an anxious, depressed mess. Please know that you feel that way for a very valid reason, because an abusive relationship is a confusion relationship, and that confusion doesn't end when the relationship ends. It continues on. And for those who haven't been through something like this, they can't even come close to beginning to understand it. While this confusion can feel exhausting, it's also part of an awakening that's happening within you. You are now starting to see problematic or abusive behavior for what it is, and you may notice that it wasn't just this one abusive person who acts this way. You may come to see the behavior of certain friends, coworkers, neighbors, people at church, and things you see on TV as problematic, whereas you didn't see this before. Others may tell you that you are overreacting, paranoid, or too judgmental of others, but odds are you aren't. You're just seeing the behavior of others, and within yourself, clearly for perhaps the first time. If this is where you are emotionally, please don't fret. You are so not alone in this, and I fully believe that you can heal from this. When I say that you can heal from this, please understand that you can't go back to being who you were. Healing never works like that, not on a physical and not on an emotional level. And you aren't broken. You are emotionally bruised, but not broken. And life from here on out will be different because you see things more clearly. But it can be confusing and crazy-making if you are the only one who is awake to this. This is why I encourage people to join a support group, so you can be around others who are awake to this as well. And while things are different, that doesn't mean seeing the world through a new set of eyes is necessarily bad. It's just, well, different. If anything, with time, you will start to become more confident in your newfound abilities of perception, and you will start to rely on others for validation that something is off. You will learn that no relationship is worth your safety or sanity, and that you have no time for confusing or crazy-making people, and you will get more comfortable figuring out what your deal breakers and boundaries are and unapologetically implementing them. I strongly encourage you not to do what so many of us have done during this time, and that is to try to jump back into dating. The worst time to try and date is when you are lonely, can't tell the difference between problematic behavior and healthy behavior, and don't trust your judgment. The odds of you getting tangled up with another emotional manipulator are really high. That level of vulnerability brings out the problematic people like you wouldn't believe. And it's important that you are grounded in who you are and have a life you love before you look to bring someone else into it. So I encourage you to spend this time right now focusing on your self-care and healing, because true healing isn't just not feeling blown apart anymore. It's knowing who you are, having a life you love, having healthy boundaries, and trusting your judgment. And all of these things take time and practice. There's no hurry to get into a relationship. There really isn't. The right person will still be there when the time is right. What's most important right now is finding yourself again and then learning to love what you find. Because when you truly love yourself, everything else, your boundaries, standards, relationships, etc., all fall into place. This takes some time, but believe me, it is so worth it. And frankly, discovering who you really are and loving what you find is the big gift in all this. This may sound really wild, but I wouldn't trade what I went through for anything. It's easy to see the gift in all this when enough healing has passed. I would have probably attacked a person had they told me that when I was fresh out of my situation. So if you feel like chucking this book into the garbage or writing me hate mail after me saying that, well, no, that's very normal too. Clarity. The flip side to confusion is clarity. Clarity is what we experience when we have certainty about what is going on in our environment, along with our place in it. Some other words that describe how clarity generally feels is relaxed, excited, safe, secure, and peaceful. Getting clarity starts with getting in tune with your emotions and realizing that all of your emotions, especially the unpleasant ones, are there to help guide you. Yoga, therapy with a good therapist who is familiar with narcissistic abuse, support groups, journaling, or meditation can all really help with this. One exercise that has really helped me to start getting in touch with my emotions has been to rank things on an emotional scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being ice cold, 5 being neutral or lukewarm, and 10 being a state of absolute joy. Let me stop for a moment and point out that a lot of people who have either been in a narcissistically abusive relationship, aren't in tune with their gut instinct, or who are starved out emotionally in some way, tend to feel really good around emotional manipulators at first. These dynamics can feel like a 10 on the emotional scale, but what I've found is that they only feel this good if we gloss over the red flags they come with. Joseph Campbell once said, "Follow your bliss," and while that's a good course to set, it's a mistake to follow our bliss if we are sacrificing our peace. In other words, it's important that we learn to follow our peace before we follow our bliss, because if we follow our bliss, but that leads to us feeling confused, like something is too good to be true, or like something is off, then we are most likely being manipulated through charm, flattery, and love bombing. Okay, so back to understanding your emotional scale. It helps to start off with objects, ideally objects that you feel strongly one way or another about, and then to assign them a number based on how you are perceiving or feeling about them right now. Then go to a level deeper and try to figure out why. The number that you assign to an item or a relationship will grow and change as you do. That's where things really start to get interesting. So what might be a 10 for you today might not be a 10 for you 6 months from now. Think about some clothing or even friendships or relationships you've had in your life. Probably at the time you had them, they were pretty high up on your scale, but now you might look back and think they'd be really low on your scale. This isn't to say that those people or those items were necessarily bad or wrong, although maybe they were. It simply means that you've grown and changed and are more in alignment with your authentic self. So, for example, an item around me right now is an ink pen. I'm not talking about anything fancy, just an ink pen that you might get in an office supply store. My initial feeling about it that I'd say it's around a 9 or a 10 for me. My why is because I really love writing with ink pens. I like how inky they are and how easily the pen moves across the paper. As a contrast, I could also say that writing with a ballpoint pen is around a 0 for me. I really don't like it. Writing with one even kind of stresses me out. I know that sounds weird, and when you go through this exercise, odds are you will come to your own quirky realizations about yourself too. And that's okay. It's actually really fun once you release any judgment you have about what your inner self has to say about things and focus on how you feel. Another example is a handful of really nice button-down shirts hanging in my closet. I realize that I really don't like button-down shirts on me. In fact, I hate them. They aren't flattering on my body type whatsoever, and I'm always tugging and pulling on them when I wear one. I had bought these shirts many years ago based on how I thought I should present myself and who I should be, instead of who I am. I didn't even realize it. I encourage you to go through your closet, rank items, and ask why. The insight you'll get is really amazing. Once you get comfortable assigning numbers to things that you don't have a huge emotional investment in, then take things to the next level and apply this emotional scale to the food you find in your fridge and your hobbies. Then transfer this scale over to your friendships and relationships, either current ones or past ones. Actually, let me stop for a second and just say that I'm so excited for you right now because this next part is really, really interesting. Okay, so now transfer the scale of 0 to 10 over to your feelings and how you feel around certain items or people. Again, release any judgment that you might feel bubbling to the surface that feels that this exercise is judging people. This isn't about judging people or things. It's not about trying to convince ourselves to be grateful for what we have. It's about tuning into what your inner self has to say. Get in tune with how you feel emotionally about certain situations, people, and things, and I think you'll find that much of your confidence with judgment is restored. Ask yourself how you feel around people who do seem to have your best interest in mind. Odds are you feel calm, cool, collected, and capable. You don't question yourself, and you don't continually wonder if they're trying to bait or provoke you into an argument, or if they're trying to stir the pot, or if they're being insensitive or rude, or if you're the one with a problem. Most likely you don't spend much, if any, time wondering about these things when you are with them, because these things aren't happening. This is the concept of a constant that I was first introduced to in the book Psychopath Free by Jackson Mackenzie, which is a fantastic book and a must-read. A constant is someone or something that you feel consistently comfortable around. My constant is my brother, as he's a good guy with consistently good behavior, and I don't find myself second-guessing his behavior or his motivations. Whenever I find myself coming across questionable behavior from a guy that I'm dating or from a friend, I take a step back and ask myself if my brother would treat a woman or friend like this, or what he'd say about it. Giving myself some emotional distance by imagining what he'd say or do in this situation often gives me the extra validation and clarity I'm looking for. Even with a constant and even with validation and clarity, it's still not easy to walk away from a problematic person or situation with whom we feel we have an intense connection. It takes time and practice with learning to trust your judgment again, and it's okay to go slow. If the relationship is solid, then it will still be there, no matter how slow you go. News story. At first I was so focused on trying to sort out whether a person was a narcissist or if they were just a normal person who lies and manipulates. Now my focus is on how I feel around people. I no longer tolerate confusing or crazy-making relationships or friendships. If anything starts feeling off, or if I start questioning or doubting myself, wondering if I can trust them, or if I'm making a big deal out of nothing, I distance myself from that person. I don't feel unsettled and unnerved around normal people with good intentions. It's so nice knowing I don't have to hang on to squirrely friendships or relationships and wait until they really screw me over before I leave. That was such a powerful realization for me. Jasmine. News story. I am sadly discovering one of my friends that I hosted a girls' weekend for this past summer is ringing my alarm bells pretty frequently, and usually when nobody else is around or paying attention, and it's pretty distressing. I still don't know what to do about it. Since this group is a package deal, and I don't really have many friends, then if I lose her, then I also lose 2 other women I care deeply for and about. I have literally spent hours agonizing about how I'm going to respond to her in the future. Because my normal modus operandi is just to go mute and to stand there stunned and not say anything. So I'm trying really hard to get some sort of a flippant response prepared, and to be armed and ready for when this happens again, and to accept she's never going to stop doing this. So if I want to remain a part of this group, I'm going to have to learn how to put on some emotional armor and learn how to rebuff her. It makes me feel really sad sometimes to have to do this, but I now know that I do have to do something if leaving the group is not an option for me. I can't just stand there and suffer. I don't know why this is so incredibly hard for me to learn to do, but it is really, really difficult to learn how to react differently. But I know my silence encourages these people to continue, and it will happen more and not less. I can literally feel her poking around, looking for an in, looking for a button to push that will make me say ouch. And it's an incredibly saddening experience to watch someone do this, act this way. It makes me feel very sad that I have to learn how to protect myself from someone I once thought was my friend. Letting it go versus moving forward. Letting it go. When people say to let it go, they usually mean to not let an abusive relationship or traumatic event continue to control so much of that person's life or to define them. And this advice, much like the rest of the well-intended hurtful things that people say, usually comes from a place of either love or concern from seeing their loved ones stay emotionally stuck in this situation. The problem with telling someone to let it go or get over it is that doing so is not that simple. And to tell someone who is in tremendous emotional pain to let it go often comes across as very minimizing and re-victimizing. No one wants to be stuck in pain, and believe me, if they could let go, they would. Telling someone to let go of the trauma caused by an abusive relationship is about as helpful and compassionate as telling a war veteran to let go of their trauma caused by a war or a person whose spouse died to get over it. People don't get over a traumatic event, but with time, compassion, and support, they can get to a place where they are better equipped to cope with their trauma. Please know that rehashing and feeling or being emotionally stuck is a sign of emotional trauma that needs to be processed and healed, and is, to a degree, a very normal part of healing. Some estimates are that it takes around 18 to 24 months for this phase to calm down enough to where a person's brain is able to shift gears and really begin to start integrating what happened to them and making it, turning it from the destruction/traumatic event of their life to a traumatic event in their life. Moving forward. Moving forward is not a straight line, and it is also not an event. It's a process. Moving forward is done on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. Moving forward involves experiencing a wide range of painful emotions and can include questioning everything and everyone. While this is a profoundly intense process, it can also be profoundly transformative and allow for the discovery and healing of old wounds that a person may have never known were even there, or perhaps thought that they had already worked through. I want to leave you with one last concept that was very encouraging and empowering for me, and that I hope will be for you too. This concept is called PTG, and that stands for post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is the growth that can only come from trauma, as with great pain can also come great transformation. Life after abuse can leave a person feeling incredibly angry and overwhelmed by all the damage and destruction that has happened, and at a loss as to where to begin picking up the pieces. Please know that the upside to having your whole world blown apart is that you can now go about consciously choosing the pieces with which you want to rebuild. You get to choose who and what you want in this next chapter of your life, and you can get rid of all kinds of limiting beliefs about who you are and what you are capable of. This takes work, but it can be done, and it starts with making small, empowering decisions about who and what you let into or keep in your life on a regular basis. New story. I heard a quote from Maya Angelou. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. That really resonated with me. I realized that even though I felt changed, that I could still decide what that meant, and that I wasn't going to let what I went through ruin my life. In fact, I used all the pain and anger I had from this, and got into the best shape of my life, and had a ton of personal growth that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and in many ways this experience woke up my highest and best self. Dorothy.